Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends, to this new session of our youth forum. The topics of today's session have already been circulated, and we will start off, inshallah, with the first one right now. And I do hope that you have had a wonderful week, and I do pray that, inshallah, the coming days are very good for you, and you are enjoying life as well, and putting your time to best use. And of course, we got plenty of time in this pandemic. So, with this reminder that please do utilize this time to the best of your ability and in the best way you can. Let's start off now for today's session, and the first segment relates to our Eid, which is fast approaching. And one of the very important rituals that we do on Eid is animal sacrifice or animal slaughter. And the question has arisen in the minds of so many people in the past so many years that today, when we do this animal sacrifice, first of all, it actually perhaps is not that much needed by people who are poor or who are needy, as much as perhaps charity or money which can be given to them, which is of much more utility than the meat which perhaps they cannot even store for a longer period of time. So, can animal sacrifice on Eid be replaced by charity? Or similarly, what exactly was the purpose of this animal sacrifice, and what does this ritual signify, and what's the whole story behind it? And because of the fact that it's very important to grasp this reality, because remember, it is one of the very spoken of worship rituals that we Muslims are required to do. So, like praying, like fasting, like going for Hajj or Umrah, paying charity or zakat, animal sacrifice in itself is a worship ritual, and especially when it is done on Eid, its significance has increases a lot. So, just let me try to explain this ritual to you. And before I start doing, I'd say that you need to understand that as far as animal sacrifice on Eid is concerned, first it should be understood that it's an optional worship ritual. It's not mandatory. It is not something which is incumbent upon us. So, we have to do away with this notion that animal sacrifice on every single or maybe an earning hand of the family is essential, or it is something that he or she is required to do. So, the first thing that needs to be dispelled, the first thing that needs to be understood, that however much important it may be, and it is, the worship ritual in itself is left to our discretion. We can undertake it because it has a very, very significant place in our religion. And if we choose not to do it, it's entirely up to us. So, the first thing that should be understood is this. The second thing, my dear friends, that you need to understand is that there are a lot of things which are symbolic in nature. If you try to understand them per se, you will perhaps not be able to gauge the essence and the wisdom behind those things. But if you look at those things as symbolic realities, you'll find that there is a lot of things that can be understood. Thus, let me give you an example. The flag of our country is just a piece of cloth, isn't it? But it's not just a piece of cloth. It has a deep symbolic significance. It's like something which unifies us as citizens of a country. We pay a lot of reverence. We feel for that flag. We would not like to fall it to the ground. And of course, there are so many things which are attached to the flag, although it's just a piece of cloth. So, you see, it has a symbolic importance. It signifies the unity of a nation. It represents a nation in a small sphere. It reflects our aspirations. In a very similar way, the national anthem that we have, all countries have a national anthem. Now, that national anthem is like again a symbolic thing which encompasses the spirit of being together as citizens of a country who vouch and who aspire for the fact that they would like to protect their country from harm, and they would like to do all that is good for its development and betterment. So, you see, these are symbolic things, And if you start analyzing these symbolic things in crude ways of logic, you'll end up mystified, because they themselves are nothing. They actually signify a certain reality which is behind them. And the case of animal sacrifice on Eid is no different. It's very similar. It is a symbolic thing. So the first thing that you need to understand is that animal sacrifice per se, I mean slaughtering an animal, is not something which in itself is required. There is something else which is behind it that is required. Just as a piece of cloth, it's not, our flag is just not a piece of cloth. It has something behind that sentiment which is expressed in that piece of cloth which becomes our flag. And that is that when we slaughter an animal, we actually give this pledge to the Almighty that today we are slaughtering this animal before you and making a vow, and tomorrow if my own life is needed, to protect my religion, to protect the bloodshed, to protect people who are persecuted in the name of religion, who are put to a lot of tests in the name of religion, and if I am required for their defense, I'll be there. So it's basically a vow. It's basically a symbolic representation that today I'm sacrificing this animal, slaughtering it in lieu of my own life. If tomorrow that is required, I'll not withhold it. So you see, this is the symbolism in animal sacrifice. And if you understand this symbolism, another thing will become very apparent. And that is that it is irreplaceable. It is not, cannot be replaced by charity. Because you see, people mostly think that animal sacrifice is basically done in order to distribute the meat of that sacrificed animal amongst relatives or amongst those who are needy. This is not the case. Had this been the case, of course, animal sacrifice could have been easily replaced by charity, because at times it is more beneficial to the recipient. So charity per se is meant to help people. It is something which is itself a worship ritual. Animal sacrifice is something which is not primarily done to help people. The meat that is the result of that sacrifice is a byproduct. It can be used by your own self, by your friends, or it can be distributed amongst other people. So if this is gauged properly, you'll be able to understand that animal sacrifice is in itself an independent worship ritual. It represents our vow, our pledge to the Almighty, that if ever our own life is needed, just as we are giving this life, this animal before you and to you, and dedicating it to you and slaughtering it with your permission, tomorrow if time comes, we are ready to sacrifice our own lives for a lot of good things, which of course are done for the purpose of protection of religion, for the purpose of protection of people, and the like. You can clearly understand that. So if this is understood, you can see that how important a worship ritual animal sacrifice is. But in spite of this importance, you have to understand that it is still an optional worship ritual. And if there is, for example, times like today, they do exist in other times as well, that when perhaps people are dying or they need help, or they are really pushed in their lives, then maybe the money that you have saved up for animal sacrifice can even be used for that purpose. But then you have to be clear that you're not replacing animal sacrifice by charity. You're actually spending that money on another cause which became very important during those days. And you must always think that the two rituals, charity and animal sacrifice, they are absolutely independent from one another. Both have their own significance, and therefore they must not be confused with one another. So this is a very important distinction that must be made, and if you don't make this distinction, you end up thinking that perhaps slaughtering an animal is merely for the purpose of distributing meat. It is precisely to this aspect which the Almighty has referred to in the Quran when it says, لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ, which means that the blood and the meat of the animal does not reach God. That's not the purpose. Spilling the blood of that animal or consuming the meat of the animal is not the purpose, but the purpose is the taqwa, is the intent that you have in your heart, and which is that, God, I'm ready to sacrifice my own life whenever the need comes, whenever the time comes. So this is something that I wanted to explain, and since Eid is coming up, and since very soon the whole Muslim Ummah will be doing this animal sacrifice or forming a different opinion, whatever. So as young people, you should know your religion. As I always say, that you have to understand the wisdom behind a practice. You have to understand why we are doing certain things, because only then will you realize that doing something has a certain significance, and you also realize whether it's a farz, it's an obligation, or it's something which is a nafil, or it's an optional thing. So much for animal sacrifice. We now move on to the second segment of our today's session, and that actually, if I remember correctly, is that the art of appreciation. How do we have this art of appreciation in ourselves? So you see, the reason that I have ventured to speak on this subject is that there is something which comes very easy to us, and that is criticism. We often criticize people. We often go to great extent in criticizing them. At times we degrade them, we demean. We become nasty. Of course, all of us are human beings. We may apologize later on, but you see, the art of critiquing others is something, it's so natural that we have to overcome it. We have to overpower ourselves somehow, that we have to stop doing these things. One way to counter this urge to always criticize other people is to replace it by a positive sentiment of equal degree, if not more. And that is, start appreciating people instead of criticizing them. That's another thing, that's something to be left to other times. But what best now can be done in most cases is to start appreciating people and to always acknowledge what they are, what they stand for. And I'm going to give you 5 tips for this art, or to learn this skill. I think that, as you would know, there are a lot of things in our life that we need to always learn, and at times practical tips, they always help in inculcating that spirit in us. So there are 5 tips that I'm going to give you regarding how you can appreciate other people, appreciate the beauty around you, appreciate the goodness around you, and get inspired by small acts of kindness, by small activities that really make the day of people. So start off, number 1. The first tip that I'd like to give is that always think that a human being is an amalgam of good and bad habits. So there are always good habits and there are always bad habits. This is something which is coexistent. All of us, in some form or the other, have these good and bad habits. No one has absolutely good habits, and there's no one who is absolutely evil in human beings. So we have an amalgam, we have a mixture of good and bad habits. So the first tip is, tune yourself to spotting the good in other people. So how do you tune yourself? You actually concentrate on the good habits, on the good points of your sister, of your brother, of your mother, of your siblings, of your children, of your friends, all those people around you. It's like putting on a telescope or even a microscope, viewing other people in that microscope, but neglecting the negative points of that person and always concentrating on the positive points. And you know what you need to do this mental exercise when you are alone. So for example, when you're lying down on your bed or when you're vacant, you just think about excuse me, just think about your sister, think about your brother, think about your friend, and imagine him or her in your mind, and then start counting the good things that he or she possesses, which you can benefit from. I mean, you can count a number of bad habits, they are there and everyone has them, but just make a list of those good habits in your mental notebook so that you're able to appreciate the good in people. This appreciation is extremely important. So that was the first tip, that you to tune your eyes and ears to good habits. Whenever you go somewhere, whenever you meet someone, whenever you have this exposure to people, especially those people who are continuously in relationship with you, as I said, your relatives, you're going to meet them every day, especially the close ones and your friends. So spot those positives in that personality. This was the first tip. I mean, of course, this is something to start off with. Spotting in itself needs focus. It itself needs your attention, that whenever I meet someone, I'm going to find out how best he or she behaves and what I can learn from that person in a positive way. That was the first point. The second point is, remember that criticism, more often than not, it really gets the better of us. When someone criticizes me or us, you not feel good all the time. It's very hard to take criticism, especially if it's true, even if the words are very polite. But if the crux of the criticism is correct, you don't feel very comfortable when you're always faced with criticism. And what happens is that you tend to get bogged down, you tend to get disappointed, and this feeling comes over us. So as a tip, remember that criticism, whether it's true, whether it's harsh, whether it's exaggerated, whatever the content, it is always, it's demotivating to start off with. You may reflect on it later on, but it's demotivating. So as an introspection, as looking in your own self, you find that when something demotivates you and really bogs you down, so if you start doing this to the other person, that's going to bog him or her down as well. So the second point, or the second tip, is that continuous criticism and a lack of appreciation of our surroundings makes people around us who could have really contributed, who could have really done well, they actually start performing below par, if you know what I mean. I mean, continuous criticism will make them think as if they are good for nothing. When we ourselves feel this, let's reciprocate this feeling by actually not criticizing them all the time too much, because that's going to make us underperform. That's going to have a bad effect. So this is an analysis that you need to do. First, that you spot those good points. Second, when you concentrate on those negative points, what it does is it makes the other person a person who is always thinking, or a person who's thinking that he does not have the wherewithal and the ability to perform. He loses self-confidence, or she loses self-confidence. So this is the second point, that you have to understand that negative criticism or criticism in itself is something which is going to affect you negatively. So if something is going to affect you negatively, it should not come out of your mouth for the other person, because that's going to happen for that person as well. And whatever best he or she could have done, he or she will end up much below the standard that he or she could have actually been able to do. The third point, the third tip in this regard is that start encouraging people as much as you can. So in order to appreciate people, you have to encourage them. And how do you encourage people? By actually acknowledging first. You actually acknowledge the attributes of a person. And when you acknowledge someone, that person grows in stature. He or she feels that he or she can do something. Your spirits are lifted up by appreciating other people. Appreciation is always something which is a confidence booster. So the third tip is start acknowledging, and actually acknowledgement is something which is now going to lead us to the fourth tip that I'm just going to mention, and that is that when you acknowledge people, you don't just acknowledge them in your heart or in your mind by praising that person. Express that acknowledgement in front of the other person. Tell them or tell her or him how you like certain qualities in that person, how you have learned from those qualities from that person. And this expression is absolutely essential, because you see, a lot of times we do appreciate people, we do acknowledge people, but we don't say it from our tongues. I mean, we just keep it to ourselves, and only on certain occasions does that praise come out of us. No, be profuse in your praise. Shower that praise that you have for the other person as much as you can. Of course, this doesn't mean that you flatter that person or exaggeratedly praise that person. No, but whatever you have in yourself, in the person, you feel for that person, express it in good words. Maybe write an email, maybe send a message to that person, maybe talk to him or her face to face, in order to make that person realize that he or she is worth something and contributing to society. So imagine a society in which people are contributing to one another's good points, acknowledging them, expressing them. So you see, this is like just like manure and water to a plant. So just as a plant grows when it receives water and manure, this praise and encouragement is something, it can work wonders. You can actually increase the stature of that person by simply acknowledging and saying to that person on his or her face that you are a wonderful person in these matters and I do learn from you. And the fifth and final tip that I'd like to give here is that do it regardless of how that person behaves to you. He could be a person who might be jealous of you. He could be a person who's not good to you. He or she could be a person who is somehow put off by you. You don't have a good rapport with that person. No. So it's not just that friends that you need to praise or friends that you need to acknowledge. No. Do it with every person, regardless whether he or she is your friend or maybe he or she is behaving like a rival or a foe or someone who is, as I said, jealous of you. So when you meet such a person who has those bad feelings for you or who does something bad for you, be extra nice to him or her. Say more than you can for that person, because this is how you acknowledge the truth. It's easy to acknowledge the truth when it comes from a sweet person, but what does it take when you find something coming from a sour person, someone who's a harsh critic of yours? Even then, if you have words of praise for that person, do acknowledge that and say them in words. So just let me revise these 5 tips, and it will be good if you could have them in your mind as well. That first of all, that you need to tune yourself to the good habits and abilities of a person. That was the first tip. The second tip was that the art of criticism, if not properly understood, can really play havoc with the other person and can make him an underperformer or her an underperformer. So this art of appreciation is something which is countering the criticism that comes out of your mouth. So that is essential in order to boost the confidence of a person. That was the second tip. The third tip that we had discussed was that you must acknowledge, you must always have that acknowledgement for the other person. And the fourth was that you just not merely acknowledge, you express it in words. You tell that person that how beautiful, how well behaved, how nicely mannered that person is, or whatever the good qualities of that person. And finally, the fifth tip was that you do it regardless of how that person has behaved towards yourself. Whatever his or her disposition regarding you, yourself, you have to acknowledge that person in a way that actually is a true reflection of your sentiments. You don't need to understate, you don't need to overstate. Just do the needful. And so this would help you, inshallah, in coming out of your, in coming towards a lot of things that that you come into life with, and you don't actually at times understand and appreciate that how beautiful this attitude is towards relationship building. You see, life is all about relationships. It's all about coming together and providing that extra energy, that extra motivation to each other. And the art of appreciation, if learnt properly and put to use, can really, really be very, very helpful. So let's now move on to the third segment of our session, and that third segment is that, well, you often might have heard from your parents, if not more, maybe in a certain way, that our religion always stresses that we use the right hand. For example, the most important thing is that we use the right hand to eat, to drink, and use that right hand whenever we start a routine, because somehow we are given to understand that the right hand is always something which has been recommended by the Prophet, which has been recommended by God, and anything done with the left hand is something which is coming from Satan maybe, or something which is a bad thing, and you should not use the left hand for eating and drinking and doing other routines. So we have to understand this again, that as far as why is it that our religion stresses the use of the right hand. But before I explain that, I'd like to explain another thing first, and that is that for natural left-handers, I mean, there are people who are, mostly people in the world are natural right-handers. But then there are people who are natural left-handers. For them, the left hand is actually their right hand, so to speak. I mean, the right hand is just a symbolism for your real hand. the hand with which you do your chores. So first of all, let me just make this disclaimer that when we say the right hand, it's not just the right hand, it's the hand that you basically use for your tasks. So people who are naturally left-handers, they don't need to change over to their right hand in order to do certain things, because for them their real hand is the left hand, so they can continue with that left hand at whatever they are doing. So parents need to be well advised for the first, for starters, that they must not force their children to change from left to right simply because they think that using the right hand is something which is recommended. I'm just going to explain the wisdom why the right hand is recommended. That's just leave it for the moment. But the first thing that you need to understand is that it's the real hand which is being talked about. And the real hand means the hand which you actually use. So the right-handers use the right hand and the left-handers use the left hand. So that's simply put, that should put at rest these concerns of parents who try to forcibly change the left hand of their children towards the right hand. And maybe this is not happening today in a lot of environments, but in a lot of conservative environments, a lot of conservative Muslim environments, this still goes on. And when a child is born and when their parents see that he or she is left-handed, they use all the force in the world to actually change that habit of that person, and without realizing that it is something by God, it is something which God has ordained, and you just cannot change something which is part of your nature into something else. Because if you do this, as examples have shown, it is something which has really destroyed the personality of that person. It has depressed that person. It has really played havoc with the psyche of that person. So the first thing is that you need to understand is this. The second thing is that what exactly is the wisdom behind using the right hand? So you see, as I said earlier on, that there is a lot of symbolism involved in many acts of our religion. And if you don't understand the symbolism, you end up actually getting caught in what is apparent and without appreciating what is the hidden part or something which we have to realize behind that. So just as we discussed the fact that animal sacrifice is not something which you have to understand per se, it is a symbol of something else. Similarly, using the right hand is a symbolic thing. And what does it stand for? Well, we have been told by the Quran that in the hereafter, people who will succeed, people who will be sent to paradise, will be handed over their accounts, their deeds in their right hands. And people who would be failing in the hereafter and God would be sending them to hell, would be receiving their accounts, the register of their deeds in their left hands. So in order to symbolize this thing and in order to make it something of a wish in ourselves, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instituted this practice that start using your right hand so that you can become people of the right hand in the hereafter. The people of the right hand in the hereafter are the ones who succeed. So if you have this thing in mind that you are going to become the people of the right hand in the hereafter, and you start using the right hand in this world and connect this symbolism, it is something which will create in you the desire, the wish to become the people of the right hand in the hereafter. And if you read the Quran, you'll find this term being used in a number of ways in the Quran, in a number of instances. Ashabul Yameen. Ashabul Yameen mean the people of the right hand. So they are the ones who will be handed over their accounts in their right hands, because they are the ones who have succeeded and would be sent off to paradise. So the Prophet of God wanted all of us to become people of the right hand in the hereafter. And for this, he instituted that symbolism, that if you understand the symbolism, then become people of the right hand in this world as well, so that you connect it to the hereafter. And as I said, this is itself is an exception to the fact people who are naturally left-handers, because for them, of course, the left hand is the right hand, is the correct hand, or is the hand which is in use. So there's no point in reverting them. The point is that they need to understand this fact, that the symbolism is something is so important, it's so powerful. And remember, we discussed this just earlier on, that in spite of this importance and this very strong symbolism, animal sacrifice is again something which is not mandatory, it is optional. In a very similar way, using the right hand, it is not of an obligation. It is highly desirable, but it has not been made mandatory upon Muslims. It is something which is extremely desirable. It is something which you should follow, because It should be our desire to become the people of the right hand in the hereafter. But if you are, for some reason, you are not able to, then this is not an obligation, just as animal sacrifice was not an obligation. So you see, if you understand this whole concept and with all these details, you will start enjoying using your right hand. Every time you use your right hand, you will have this picture or this motivation that inshallah in the hereafter also I'm going to be the person of the right hand, because hopefully God will give me my account in the right hand as a expression of the fact that I have succeeded. This will actually instill in you the desire to become a good person, because you see, in order to receive the account in your right hand, you have to be a good person, you have to be a righteous person. So you see, just a very small symbolism, but it's such a small thing, but it has such deep significance, such as it's just exactly the same way that animal sacrifice is something which you don't understand when you slaughter an animal. But when you understand the sentiment behind that and the reason behind it, it suddenly becomes very important, and you feel as if you're doing something very, very significant in life. In a very similar way, using the right hand might seem very trivial, but if you understand the symbolism, it becomes a powerful and a very potent influence that I have to become a person who is going to succeed in life, and someone who is always going to connect with this symbolism. So if you are able to understand this, I think you'll be able to use your right hand and not question it, or maybe not always discuss it. And remember that inshallah, when you grow up, you have your own children, or you have your own grandchildren, if you grow up even more. Remember to transmit this, to transfer this legacy of understanding religion, the wisdom behind certain practices to your children. So you see, because of the fact that we have generally not received the reasoning and the wisdom behind certain religious rituals, we start lagging behind these rituals. We don't act upon these rituals simply because we think that they are meaningless. I mean, they are so trivial. But if you have that importance attached to it and the wisdom explained behind it, you really feel very good about it and you would like to follow it. So remember, that is not something for your own self. Whenever you learn some wisdom, whenever you learn something about any reality, try to transmit it to your friends, to your siblings, and of course when you grow up, to your children and to your surroundings, because this is something that we have now been missing from our own parents. I mean, what they generally transfer is a lot of hearsay, and at times they're not able to answer questions that we have for them. But you should be in a position to explain these things to their minutest details. So thank you for being patient in this regard. And now I shift gears and come to the last segment of our youth session for today, and that is, how should we deal with the LGBTQ community, which exists all around us. It is increasing. I mean, it was always there, but it's now becoming discernible because people don't feel any inhibition in expressing their sexual orientation. And if they belong to a certain orientation, it is generally well known in a society, especially if you're living in a Western society. You're not living in a Muslim society. Even in Muslim societies, we do find that this demarcation is something which is now cropping up, and this thing is taking its roots in a society. So how should we deal with these people? I mean, living in the West, you'll find that you have them in your friends, you have them in even your relatives, you have them amongst your teachers, you have them all around you, and you have this feeling that maybe they are a different lot of people. And the apparent trend of our parents is that they stop you from meeting such people, or if you are friends with such people, you might yourself feel that guilt in you that maybe you're doing something wrong, or you would defy your parents if they say that you should not come close to such people. So you see, all kinds of questions crop up in our mind as to how we should deal with people of this community. So you see, first of all, you need to understand that to have a difference of opinion in a sexual orientation is a very normal thing. It should not be a cause of alarm. It should not be something which should start ringing bells and you, become a person who is drawn away from such people. No, you see, every person has a lot of rights given to him or her by the Almighty, and that is that if they wish to do something which is against what God wishes, God does not take them to task immediately for that, and it is a choice that they need to make. So for the first thing that you understand is that however much we might be having a difference of opinion with the LGBTQ community, for example, the fact that we would say that this is something which human nature or which God Himself has not allowed, because it is something which is detrimental to the institution of the family. And when God created mankind, He started off mankind with a pair of opposite genders, a man and women. They live together to form a family, and any other setup in which two men or two women or maybe different sexual orientations come together, they are a means of being a potential harm and a potential danger to the institution of family. So therefore, the Almighty has stopped us, and He has even punished the nation of a prophet who had indulged in such things. So that is something that we can hold as Muslims, and it is something very dear to us. But that should not be a cause of ostracizing or cutting yourself off from a community which has a different sexual orientation. No, I think you should behave normally with such people. If they live in your society, if they are close to you, if they are your friends, if they are your neighbors, behave with them as if they are human beings, of course, and always concentrate on what they can offer for you to learn. For example, in spite of belonging to a community that we would not agree on ideological basis, they are still good human beings. You can learn from them. They are extremely charitable. They are very generous. They are sympathetic. They are kind. So don't pass a judgment about them, who they are. Let God be their judge. As far as you are concerned, you just behave as if they are human beings, and you learn from their good qualities. You don't need to adopt their ways. You don't need to discuss their orientation, because this is something whose discussion is also not very easy to do. But if there is a chance, you can always express your opinion that this is how you feel, that the Almighty started off this world with a family of people of opposite genders, and it shows to us that a natural family comes into being through a man and a woman, and this is how I feel, and this is how I'd like to communicate. But I do respect your opinion if you feel the other way. So you see, the sensitivity should be on both sides. Just as you should be sensitive towards the fact that you have a particular point of view, the others also, I mean, the people who belong to this community should also have this magnanimity in accepting some criticism. I mean, it's just something which is of more academic in nature, more a friendly exchange between two communities. But in spite of that you have a difference of opinion regarding a certain orientation, it should not stop you from your daily routine. For example, attending their birthdays or going to their parties in whatever. I mean, if they do these things in a proper way, and just as you attend the parties or functions of other people, merely this orientation should not be something which should stop you from growing close to them, because this would be a discrimination which is totally uncalled for. You can have your own view about life, and the other person is also free to choose his or her view on life, and that's the end of that. But a friendly exchange, social interaction should not be limited, should not be decided on the basis of the fact that a person has a different sexual orientation. It should be done on the basis that a person is a good human being who has a lot of positive attributes, from whom you can learn, and with whom you can actually spend some time whenever the need arises. But the bottom line is that stop hating such people. Do remember that at times this hate is instilled in us because of social pressure, because of our social environment, because of our parents' sermons, who think that they are evil people. No. You see, if you think that a person is doing wrong, let God be the judge. As I always say, that you must not hate the sin. I mean, you must not hate the sinner. You can hate the sin as much as you can, but don't hate the person who is doing it, because that person can change any time, and that person is worthy of your sympathy. He or she is worthy of your respect. So hate the sin, but not the sinner. So this is a very important lesson that we need to learn, not only in this particular aspect of the LGBTQ community, but in every sphere of life, that human beings, whatever they are, whoever they are worthy of our respect. They are worthy of our care, attention, sympathy, on all those human qualities and all those human attributes that you would expect from them for us. So, my dear friends, now I come to the end of this youth session, and I do hope that it would have raised a lot of questions in your mind. And so I would now hand it over to Ghazal, who is the co-host of this session. So please move ahead and let's enter into the Q&A session.
Participant was asking questions, so Minnie, please go ahead and ask.
Thank you. My question was from the first topic about animal sacrifice. So, what is it like? On what reason are we not allowed to cut our nails or our hair if there's an animal that's being sacrificed in your name?
So that is basically an etiquette of animal sacrifice. Again, it's not something which is obligatory. It is basically an etiquette that when you intend to sacrifice an animal, so you don't cut your nails and hair in those first 10 days, because this is like vowing your own self, presenting your own self to God. And when you present your own self to God, this was the ancient custom in which that presentation meant that you would devote yourself in all affairs, and you would not actually physically beautify yourself in any way, or physically have that attention towards your physical self as much. So basically, it's something that a person who intends to do that animal sacrifice, it is recommended, again not obligatory, it is recommended that he or she should not cut her hair or nails. But as I said, it's basically it's something which actually symbolizes the fact that this is a person who is going to devote himself and present himself to God through that animal. And the etiquette of that presentation is that you actually leave all those embellishments behind you and you devote yourself to God in a certain way.
So it's like a spiritual.
It's something spiritual, and again not obligatory. Even if you want to sacrifice an animal, again, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Hamza Ahmed. Hamza, please ask your question.
Thank you. So I have a question regarding the first session. So you tell that it is not obligatory for everyone to do Qurbani, but we find a narrative that tells us that the Prophet said that anyone who is having that capacity to do the sacrifice and still he doesn't do this, he should not come near the mosque of a Muslim or like that. And second question is that can we just do the sacrifice via some organization that does this on large scale?
Right. So Hamza, your first.
Still, we are not able to see the animal. We cannot touch it.
Right.
And we cannot do it with our own hands.
Right. So as far as your first question is concerned, you were referring to that hadith of the Prophet which says that a person who has the ability to sacrifice and he still does not sacrifice should not come to our prayer place. This is an expression of very high recommendation from the Prophet. Remember, the way in things are expressed in a narrative, they assume the words of the narrator. It's not necessarily the words of the Prophet himself, because when from other parts of religion, when we see that it's not an established norm or a directive from the Quran or the Sunnah, neither it is found in the Quran nor in the Sunnah, and we find something very, very stressed in hadith, we need to understand the words, that they are basically something which are urging us that without any reason we should not actually not do Qurbani, because it is a very, very recommended thing. And the way the importance of this recommendation has come out in a way as if the Prophet is telling us that the person who does not do this, he will be doing a great sin. So as I said, the stress here is that you need to understand that everything which is a basic directive of religion has to be expressed in the Quran and the Sunnah, where it is not found. And if you find a hadith which is presenting an independent directive which is not found in the Quran and Sunnah, then you have to understand its placement. And if you understand its placement, you can clearly see that what the Prophet is telling people is that in spite of the fact that they know the importance and they would like something to happen, and they are not able to do it, then they should really think that they are maybe doing something very wrong. So it's like a very strong recommendation. It still does not make it obligatory, because as I said, something is made obligatory only by the Quran and Sunnah. A hadith cannot make something obligatory independently. We have to understand it and place it in the whole structure of religion, And if we do so, we'll find out that, first of all, such strong words are expressing a recommendation, and these strong words, as I said, are not necessarily coming out of the mouth of the Prophet. You see, they are being conveyed to us through 4 or 5 people who are in between, and the way that degree of intensity reaches us at times is not the same degree in which the Prophet himself would have said something. As far as your second question is concerned, yes, in circumstances where you're not able to sacrifice, it's recommended in normal circumstances to do it yourself. But if that, for some reason, because there are a lot of communities in the world in which animal sacrifice in their homes is not permitted by law, and therefore you're not able to partake in that ritual. So in that case, even if you're not able to see the animal, as long as the sacrifice is done after the prayer of Eid, because that is an essential part, it should not precede the Eid prayers. It has to be done after Eid. So if an organization that you know does that after the Eid prayer that you are offering, it is fine, because in that case you are actually doing something in the least form. It's still something of a symbolic thing in nature, and you can visualize that when that animal was being sacrificed, it was as if you were presenting yourself to God, that one day if my life is needed, I'll not withhold myself. So you just need to imagine that as much as you can, although it's difficult because the animal is not right in front of you. But as I said, it's still something that you can do given the situations and circumstances of so many societies in contemporary times.
Thank you.
Next is Ibrahim Malik. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Yes, sir. I had a question regarding the second segment about my practical behavior towards criticism and swear words. Because I see a lot of children, they use swear words and they criticize regardless about what the other person is doing. So how can I urge them to stop using these words, and how do I react to them?
Well, the first thing that perhaps you should do is that make friends with these people. Make them understand that you are a well-wisher. Wait for an opportune time. You see, what we do is that when we would like to correct a person, again, correction is an art, it's a skill. So just as criticism is a skill, the art of appreciation is a skill, correction and suggesting someone to improve himself in itself is a skill that you need to learn. And the most important thing for that skill is that you don't start off criticizing a person as soon as you see something wrong coming out from him or her. You come close to that person, you make friends with that person, make that person feel that you are his or her true friend and would not like something that he or she might be doing that should be a bad thing, and that would like a person, you have a very close relationship with that person in this way. So I think you start off with that, and then lead by example. You yourself don't do what the other person is doing, so that that person is given this flash that, okay, life can be spent by not swearing and still enjoying life. It's a way in which we are just wasting our energies and contaminating our tongue. And then the third thing is that make him a person who is closer to God. Bring that person closer to God through various means. Of course, this is something which is it depends on the person that you're facing, and make him realize that life has a larger mission to offer. You have to have a focus in life. You must have the positive aspects in life in you. Start off by setting yourself a target in life. So you see, these are different ways and you become a friend to that person. I've just alluded to a few of them. There are so many other things that you can do in which, instead of cutting yourself off from such people, make yourself even closer to that person. And then whenever you find an opportune moment, and then when that friend has also seen yourself not indulging in these things, maybe the time would come up and you yourself think it is a ripe time, that you say, well, these words they just contaminate our language and they give a bad impression, etc. So it's a long and arduous journey. You see, criticism or correction, if I may say, is something that has to be learned. You have to wait. You have to have a lot of patience, and you have to overcome your ego as well, because it's not easy to be with a person who you don't like in certain habits of his or her and still be friends with that person. But that patience, that love, that sympathy should come out of yourself to the other person who should feel that love and sympathy and care from you. And this is something which can be instrumental in changing that person. And as I said, you have to wait for that. You have to strike, as they say, when the iron is hot. And this is not easy at all. But make it a point to wait and see when best you can do, and never run away from such people, never cut off yourself from such people, because they need us more than anyone good. Remember, I've been teaching the Bible, and what Jesus once said is that sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he once said that it's always good to be good people. What really makes a person is that he's good to bad people as well, or seemingly people who need to be corrected. So these are some of the tips. Of course, I can give you more directed advice if we can maybe, if you have that question directed to me personally and you tell me more about your friend, that we can plan that out. But this is something of a generic thing that you can follow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next is Riha Ramzan. Riha, please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, my question is about your last session, LGBT community. Sir, many people, especially our religious group, says that this is basically an anti-Islamic agenda, as the people are promoting homosexuality. But as far as my understanding is concerned, I basically found it like it's something like working for the rights of those, as you have explained. It is basically working for their rights. The people don't have basic rights in community. So this campaign is basically working for them. So how do you consider it? It is something like anti-Islamic agenda, or it is something like acceptable?
I think there's no such thing as an anti-Islamic agenda. You see, what you need to understand is that every person has been given the choice to have a worldview, a view regarding his or her own sexuality, a view with regards to social aspects in life. This is a God-given right that each one of us has been given. At a number of places, the Quran says that had God wanted everyone to be a believer, He could have done so. It was not difficult for Him. He gave this choice to people to do what they would like to. What God has done is He has shown the right path and the wrong path. Your own conscience, the people around you, the books of God, the prophets of God, they have left no stone unturned in telling you what the right and wrong paths are. But He has not forced people to accept that a right path or a wrong path. It's being left to the choice of that person. So I think we should deal it, or we should view this whole topic to be as something which is basically a human right which God has given us, and every person has that right, and we can fight for that right as well, because in spite of not agreeing with what the person ultimately adopts, we do agree with this person that every person has been given this choice by the Almighty. Ultimately, how he behaves with that choice and how the Almighty will judge him and reward or punish him is not something for us to say. It is something for God to say. So therefore, we would differ with a certain right that a person has, but at the same time, we will always advocate the fact that a person has been given this God right. God has given him this right. And we should not talk of these things as an anti-Islamic agenda. It's basically more of a propaganda sort of a thing. We should view it as a freedom of will sort of a thing which God has given each human being.
So you find it something like working for their rights rather than promoting. Is it so?
Yes, you see, it depends what they are doing. If they want their rights, they have they have the right to be given these rights. I mean, they are part of your human community. It's just like saying that people who are handicapped, or people who are rich, or people who are poor, who have a different religion, etc. So it's like saying that every single person in a society has that basic human right to express himself or herself and be accorded and not be discriminated and not be made distinct merely because of the sexual orientation that he or she might have.
And we can also be part of this.
Of course, obviously.
If we want to.
Obviously, if you think that the other person is being deprived of their rights, it's just like working for people who are deprived of their rights. Even if you don't agree what they ultimately adopt, but you should say this, that every person has been given this a choice by God.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Nida Abbasi. Nida, please go ahead, ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My first question is actually regarding Bakrid and animal sacrifice. So often we as youngsters, what I feel is we feel spiritually disconnected through this whole, animal sacrifice, because our parents are involved in, sending money and most of us are in countries where, we cannot do it in our backyard. So we're not even, involved in it as such. So my question is, as the youth, how is it, do we get this qurbani in our usual life? How do we become a part of this? Are there any other ways in which we could become a part of this sacrifice that's the only question that we have.
Right. So this is a very important thing, Nida, that you have raised, and of course this disconnect is there simply because the wisdom behind animal sacrifice is generally not understood, and people ultimately end up sending money to various charity organizations because they think that animal sacrifice and charity are virtually the same thing, and it's like saying that, well, people don't need meat as much as they need perhaps some money for the fee of their child or for something that they have to pay. As I said, I've just tried to explain what that difference is. And the way that you can actually partake in this ritual is, especially in countries where it's not allowed in your own homes or in your own backyard that you can sacrifice an animal, is just to maybe use your imagination. This whenever you feel that this is something that is in your own hands, that when you grow up and you are an earning person, then as much as you can, you'll try to have this done. That maybe there could be instances that through Skype or through electronic means, at times it is possible to see that animal which is being sacrificed in some other place, that you can view it. If you can get that, for example, to be done, because I think this now is going to become a possibility, then this is one way in which you can view that qurbani being taking place in front of you. And even if that is not possible, because it's not possible all the time in every country, then, as I said, you just need to be strong in your imagination and think that the money that you've sent for a sacrifice for a particular animal, and this would be the time approximately in which it would be being slaughtered, it would be slaughtered in that time, because generally these people also give you a time that. So you just sit maybe and imagine that this would be a time that sacrifice is going to take place, and imagine yourself that you're doing something as a symbolism, as a strong symbolism of the fact that when this animal has been given merely as in lieu of your own life, and if ever there comes a chance in which you would face reality, in which, for example, to save people, to save persecution, to save a lot of bad things from happening, you give your life, you just go through this mental exercise that I'm preparing myself, and inshallah, if this happens, I'll be there. So it's like, I mean, it's not the same thing as seeing the animal and then imagining. It's more difficult not to see and then imagine. But as I said, if you know the wisdom behind it and the intention behind it, you can use that imagination to, as much as you can, get yourself involved in it and make other people understand that this is something it's like the pinnacle of humanity, in which you are sacrificing yourself, you're becoming selfless, or at least pledging to become selfless, that if ever the need arises for your own life, you'll not withhold it. So I think these are some of the ways that might help, and you can think of more as well. But as I said, if you realize the importance of this ritual, your own mind will suggest you a lot of ways in which you can become part of this supreme ritual. And don't forget that what the Prophet Abraham did when he actually sacrificed Ishmael in these times. And I'm going to talk about it, inshallah, in our next week's session, that why did the Almighty ask for a human sacrifice? Because, of course, we are not sacrificing a human being. What we are doing is we are sacrificing an animal. So the question which is very important is that why did the Almighty ask a prophet of God to sacrifice his son, who would be a future prophet as well? And how could this be justified in human terms? So inshallah, we'll talk about that later, and this will bring out some more aspects of this ritual. But for the moment, as I said, perhaps if you could just either imagine or maybe ask the other party who's sacrificing it on your behalf to give you a visual, even if it's not a live visual, he could take pictures of that and send it over to you. and whilst viewing those pictures, you can still be a part of that ritual.
Thank you, sir. Actually, just a request for like the next sessions that we'll be doing. Is it possible for us to do a session on like Masjid Al-Aqsa and the current status of like Hagia Sophia? Because I know that I don't know if the sessions that you've planned for the coming weeks is just that it's something that has been happening, and a lot of times we are getting questioned regarding it. So it's just a request if it's possible to sort of incorporate that in our next session.
We'll do that. Of course, these are possible, and all these suggestions are always welcome from all of you. And thank you very much for these suggestions. Inshallah, we'll take them up in one of the coming sessions. And all these, the ones that you have pointed out, are very important issues. And as you said, that we are often questioned, and at times we are at loss to have to answer it correctly. So inshallah, we'll do that in the coming sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aiza, you are next. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, sir. I have a question regarding the first part of the talk. Does the significance drop when you pay someone to sacrifice an animal, or is it the same?
Well, as I said, if you do it in your own, if you are able to do it in front of your own eyes, like in your own backyard, or maybe there are countries in the world in which they do a animal sacrifice at a particular place, and they invite you over. You can go to the abattoir or some similar facility. So if that is possible, I would say that is much more recommended, because that will really be something in which you can have a more closer experience. But if that is not possible, of course, the lesser form of that would be that you give that money to an organization who does it on your own behalf. And as I just explained in my previous answer, that at least you get a picture of that animal, or maybe a video of that animal, and when you see that happening, you have those sentiments which I just explained. So it depends on the possibility. If it can be done by yourself or by your own personal presence, that is the most recommended. But if that for some reason is not possible, then of course lesser means should be adopted. But we should actually give this importance to this worship ritual, because I think that over the years we have lost track of the fact that the real importance of this is symbolic in nature, and we are continuously bombarded with these questions that why should we sacrifice an animal for its meat, when people are in need for something else than meat itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I have some written questions and some comments from Facebook. So first I'll go for the written question. And it has two parts. The first part is the participant want to know the meaning of fitra. He's been struggling. He had done some research as well, but need your valuable input and definition to understand the meaning of fitra. And the second part is that what it means by Islam is the deen of fitra.
So you see, fitra is the same thing which you call in English as human nature. Human nature is something which makes you distinct from animals, and there are three basic qualities which make you distinct. One is that you have this sense of aesthetics. The second, you have this intellect in you. And the third is the moral part of life that you have, which animals don't have. So if you want to understand what exactly human nature is, you can compare it, which makes you distinct from animals. So of course there is this instinct which we have. For example, we eat and animals eat. They indulge in procreation, we indulge in procreation. They drink and we drink. So these are what is called the jibilla, or the instinct. But other than that, what makes you distinct from animals or other life forms are these three things: that you have this aesthetic sense in you, you have the intellect in you, and you have a sense of right and wrong. These are the three things which make you distinct. And if you have these things in you, you find yourself that you are a person who has been created on the fitra, or the nature on which God has created you. And having said that, the Almighty has said that this human nature is something on which the Almighty has actually modeled His own religion. And whatever the religion that is being taught to you, you have its basics in your own human nature. So you see, whenever you study religion, you'll find out that the ultimate result of a research is that the religion that is being portrayed to you is something which satisfies your inner self. The urge for that is found in your inner self. So if you divide religion, you'll find out that it has a part in which you are related to God, which is called worship rituals. So even if God is not there for you to tell us that what are those worship rituals, the urge to connect to a supernatural being, the urge to connect to your creator is found in your fitra, in your human nature. And when that urge is replenished or is fulfilled through wahi, you feel as if something has happened and you've quenched your thirst. So you see, this is an example that the connection with someone who has created you, the thirst is there in your own self, in your own fitra, but the way how to do it is something that you lack, and it is here that wahi comes and fulfills that thirst. Another example is that you would like to know what are the right things that you should eat and drink. I mean, but the thirst and the hunger is found in you. You have that hunger and thirst in your own fitra. The only thing which wahi comes and tells us is, well, this is what you should eat and this is what you should not eat. So these are some of the examples in which you see that there is a certain thirst found in ourselves, in which we know that this is something that should happen, but the ultimate answer is not always that easy, and for that you need the guidance of wahi. And I always try to make you understand this aspect by telling you that basically you need to understand that there is something which is called innate guidance, inborn guidance, which you have in your own human nature. For example, the guidance of right and wrong. And then there is this revelatory guidance which comes from God. So innate guidance and revelatory guidance, they are locked like this, and wherever there is deficiency in the innate guidance in finding out what the true path is, that revelatory guidance comes and guides it. So it's like a complementary relationship, and there are a lot of things in which that innate guidance is sufficient. It guides you to the right path. For example, basic morality is something which is known to every human being, but there could be some pitfalls in which the wahi comes and sort of supplements that innate guidance. So it's innate guidance all the way, supplemented by God's guidance or revealed guidance in areas where that innate guidance falls short of.
Thank you so much. So that also defines that Islam is the deen of fitra.
Right.
Or would you like to elaborate on that?
So as I said, because the religion which is revealed to all prophets of God has been Islam ever since Adam and right up to Muhammad. So because of the fact that this religion addresses that thirst found in our human nature, which actually answers the urges found in our human nature, that we say that Islam or the religion of God never imposes something new on you as if you find it to be something alien. The basic thirst and the basic need and the basic urge for every external directive given from wahi is found in your own nature. It's just a replenishment. It's just something being given externally in order to satisfy that thirst.
Sir, sorry, I was the one to ask the question, and I just have a lead on. Thank you, ma'am, for reading it out. It was just because it's early here. So would you say that someone could come to be a Muslim if he just followed his fitrah and he didn't have access to the Quran? How close would he be to
He would
Islam?
be very close to being Muslim, of course, and that is what the Prophet has once remarked, that the person is always born on fitrah. Every person. It is the external, the words are yuhavvidanihi or yunassiranihi. It is always the parents or the people around you who give a certain religion. For example, being a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim is something which always happens externally. As far as a person by birth is concerned, he has that natural proclivity, that natural bent which is found in his own self to submit to a superior being. And as I said, in its raw form, Islam is nothing but that submission, that feeling of being a created person who has to acknowledge a creator who would once or maybe in a later time, as he has promised in the Quran, will keep sending that guidance in case it is needed by our fitrah.
then sir, why is this fitra so weak that someone just, his parents make him a Christian and he becomes a Christian? Why
So
does
it's not
stop
weak.
him?
You
Why
see,
can't they follow?
what the Prophet is telling us, that it is the influence that at times does that. This influence makes a person, and this, the same thing happens when a person is a Muslim. I mean, if you don't bifurcate Christianity or Judaism and Islam, because basically they are Islam, and if you speak of one religion, which is divine religion, it has always been Islam. So what the Prophet is telling us, that as far as the external directives are concerned, they are always given by the environment. But a person by birth has that thirst. It's like a template which is being provided for you, in which you can fill it up and use it for the purpose that it has been given. So the basic template is the same for all human beings. Excuse me.
So it's like, I want to know what I want to eat, and to get that answer, I can have many choices, but Islam will fulfill that the best.
In case there is a question. On most occasions you'll be absolutely correct in your choices, but because there are certain things in which we can make the wrong choice, so what Wahi does is that it actually gives you this guidance, that in case there is a possibility of making a wrong choice, which is a very small possibility, a remote possibility, a very small percentage is that area in which you can make that error, does Wahi interfere? Otherwise, largely, for example, it tells us that our own human nature is sufficient for that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. We have one question from Facebook, and they are asking that I agree not to be being judgmental, but I feel for young and impressionable minds, mingling with such a community which is LGBTQ might influence them in a negative way towards this inclination. Please comment.
I could not, sorry, I couldn't hear the last two sentences.
So I'll say it again. So they are asking that they find that the young and kids, their minds are very impressionable. So if they mingle with the LGBT community, they influence them in a negative way towards this inclination. So how would you comment on that?
I think this is basically a weak start, which the parents themselves need to blame, because you see, if this impressionable age, in this impressionable age, they are told and they are instructed in the right way, that this is how God has given mankind the choice to make for himself or herself, and you need to make your own choice and let the other person make his or her choice, that would be a strong enough reason for that person to be an independent thinker with regard to his or her orientation. I think here we are basically frightened of other people. Instead of getting frightened, we need to empower our children. We need to let them know that they are fully capable of taking decisions, and you can, as parents, you should guide them what the proper path is, and not stop them, because you see, it's like saying that you should be in water and still don't get wet. How can you be in the water of the society and not get influenced, so to speak, by not getting wet? So when you are living in a society, you just cannot isolate yourself. Instead of isolating yourself, or instead of making that person draw away from these realities, a better way is to empower that person, your child. Let him or her know how God is created, what is his plan, how does he accomplish his plan, and how he has given this freedom of choice to every single human being after telling him what right and wrong is. I think this is a way in which you give that cognizance, that consciousness to your child, and he can make a better decision for himself or herself. And don't worry if there is some deviation, because whenever you make choices, at times you make errors also. But so long as you are given this feeling that you are the master of your own fate, you are the master of your own destiny. And when I say this, I don't mean that that you don't look for what right and wrong are in the society and in the books of God. Of course, they are there for you. But ultimately, studying everything which is around you, it is your choice that you have to make. And if people are making a different choice than your choice, it is a God-given right. And this is nothing to be scared of. It is a right which God has given them. Had it been a thing to be scared of, why would have God given this right to us? He would have forced everyone to adopt what righteousness is. He never did so. So if God has not done something, why do we wish to do that thing?
Thank you so much. In the second round, now we have a question from Minnie. Minnie, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. So my question was, you talked about the sentiments of animal sacrifice and feeling them. And I have a broader question. Like, how do you begin to feel sentiments towards animal sacrifice or even towards feeling God? Like, how do you know what that feels like?
Sorry, I couldn't get your question. What do you? How do you know what? How do you feel like what?
How do you feel the sentiments of animal sacrifice or even beginning to feel God? Like, how do you know what these feelings are like, or if you're feeling them or not?
Well, it's if you understand the wisdom behind certain acts. For example, why do you pray? Why do you fast? Why do you go for Hajj? Basically, these are worship rituals which connect you as a human being to a higher being who is God, who is our Creator. You find that you are being created, and as a creation, you lack a lot of things. You are a weak person, and you need that strength from that external being. So if you have that connectivity with God, vis-a-vis the fact that you are the person who has certain deficiencies and certain weak points that can only be strengthened if you have that God connection, you'll immediately have that urge to have that connection. You see, it is that deficiency that we have in ourselves. And if we guide that deficiency towards God, that you can immediately start feeling God. What happens is at times that deficiency is always there, and we answer that deficiency through some superstition or through some other phenomenon which might not be correct in giving us that God connection. So if you have that thirst and you have the connection or the thirst for that connection, and then that external guidance gives you that feeling that you are being satiated, you are being drenched, you are being provided for, you immediately have the feeling that there is someone around you who is taking care of you, who is looking after you, who has given you parents, who has given so much to you in life. So it's like connecting the blessings around you and the weaknesses that you have with the external environment in which God has made all those arrangements to have you fulfilled. And as far as the animal is concerned, of course, when you sacrifice an animal, again, it's something that you need to understand the wisdom behind it, which I just explained a number of times, that if this is a feeling that you have, that this life that we have been given is from God, He can take it away. And the best way that we can lose our lives is to lose our lives while bearing witness to the truth, while sacrificing it as a selfless person who vouches for what the truth is, who is ready to give up his or her life if matters come to this to such an extent that for the cause of justice, for the cause of truth, for the cause of peace, you are called upon to give your life. You'll not withhold it, just as you're not withholding the animal today. So it's like imagining yourself, it's like drenching yourself with that feeling, which is the real wisdom behind animal sacrifice.
Sorry, I think it was more along the lines of how do you know that you've been connected with God, or if you have a connection of any sorts, or if you're feeling Him.
So you feel that satiation, that you're satiated, that something which was missing is now there. I mean, there was a void, there was something which is not in you, and you feel being replenished. For example, when you see God's blessings around you, you feel that feeling of gratitude. That gratitude, as I gave you that example, I think some weeks ago, that when someone gives you something in this world, you have that feeling of gratitude for that person, and you immediately want to reciprocate. So when you see the things around you, your parents, your environment, your own physical body in which you have everything normal, no handicap, you have those feelings of gratefulness, of gratitude. And when you connect to God with that gratitude, and when you say thank you to Him, just as saying thank you to your friend who gives you something makes you feel good because you have actually reciprocated, or you have done the needful. In a very similar way, when you do this for God and you thank Him through the prayer or by doing other charitable acts, you feel as if that void in you which was there, the spiritual vacuum which was there in every person, which is there in every person, all of us, has got that feeling that someone has filled it, and that thirst is no longer there, and you feel as if the thirst was quenched. So it's like having a glass of water in which you were thirsty, and as soon as you drank that water, what happened? Something happened which made you satisfied. So you get that inner feeling of satisfaction, that inner comfort, which makes you feel as if you are now connected with God.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last question is from Facebook. It's by Rafia Khwaja. Although you have talked about it a little bit, but she wants more clarity from you. And she's saying that during this pandemic, we can't do Qurbani. Can we send money to starving Yemeni children?
I just said that because as far as animal sacrifice is concerned, it's an independent worship ritual. It cannot, the two are not interchangeable. But in current circumstances, if you've saved up money for Qurbani and you think that there is a worthier cause than this, that in which you can spend your money, of course you can do it. But you do it as if you're doing something of a charitable thing. Just don't think that it is replacing animal sacrifice, because that is irreplaceable. That is done for to express another sentiment, and this is done to express another sentiment. So it's choosing between two worship rituals. The both are something which are recommended, and you make a choice. But when you send that money for Yemeni children, you think that you're actually helping them out. It's not that you are actually offering that ritual of Qurbani. As I said, they're two different things. But since Qurbani in itself is an optional thing, and if you think that the money for that Qurbani can be used for a worthy cause, of course you can use it.
Thank you so much. Ahmed Shoaib has left, but he has left a question for you if you can answer. It's slightly off topic, but related to Hajj and Tawaf. So he's asking, after listening to Hamdi Sab as well, that probably confused that he heard that Sa'i is actually Tawaf of Safa and Marwa. Does it mean that we should go around the mountains instead of walking in between them?
No, actually, this is an Arabic term in which it's tawaf actually means walking about. It's not always walking around. So the tawaf of these Safa and Marwa, it's called Sa'i. So these are used interchangeably by the Quran. So when it says that you walk about or walk down from one hill to the other hill, so the same word actually can be used for this purpose as well. So it's not always circumambulation. It does not always refer to a circular path. It means to a path which is adopted between two things. So it is used for this meaning as well.
Thank you so much. So that's pretty much it for the day. We don't have any more questions. If Dr. Saab, you have any comments or concluding remarks, otherwise we can conclude the session.
Well, nothing much except that just that small reminder that make the best use of the time that you have in these COVID times in which there's a lot of things that are going on. So make the best of the time that you have, enjoy your life, and do think that this is a time in which you can learn a lot of things, learn a lot of skills, learn a language, learn an instrument, anything. Dedicate your time, and always be someone who is planning for the time that he or she has been given. It's a gift of God.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you next week, inshallah.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye. Khuda Hafiz.